Hey everybody, what's up? Aaron here, Question Period Canada. Very exciting episode to bring you this evening. We've watched the question period and now we've made the highlights. No more Mr. Speaker, no more delays, no more translators, just the information in a compressed, concentrated dose so that you get the Canadian politics, the information that you want without delays. It goes by so smoothly and quick. It's awesome. Let's get right into it. To kick things off, Poilievre is going to launch into Trudeau a number of times, asking very similar questions to what we've heard, with the same old answers that aren't really answers. Let's go.
Austerity and cuts are exactly what Canadian families are living today. 7 million of them are cutting meals because they can't afford food prices after he's inflated them. And many are cutting homes and forced to live in tents because mortgage rates have risen so fast under this Prime Minister's deficit. Scotiabank now calculates government deficits are adding 2 full percentage points to the rates. That's $700 per month in higher mortgage payments. Next year, $900 billion, the next 3 years, $900 billion of new mortgages, or 2/3 will come up for renewal. We risk a massive default crisis. Will the Prime Minister announce a plan to balance the budget to bring down mortgage rates so Canadians can keep their homes?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, we've seen this movie before. The Conservative politician's approach to facing challenges is always cuts and austerity. He recognizes, like we all do, that Canadians are facing difficult times, and his solution is for the federal government to do less, to invest less in Canadians, to be there less to support Canadians. That is not what we're going to do, Mr. Speaker. Over the past number of months, we've announced the construction of over 100,000, 200,000 homes across the country. We're delivering support for people in buying groceries with greater competition, and we're moving forward with clean jobs into the future, whether it's manufacturing with Stellantis or Volkswagen, whether it's resources. We're moving forward to support workers.
L'honorable chef de l'opposition.
What we're proposing is for the government, the federal government, to do less damage and cost less money so that Canadians don't have to live in austerity and cuts like they are today. Today we found out that rent rose faster in October than in any month in 40 years. The Prime Minister's solution to that? Quadruple the carbon tax. Quadruple the carbon tax? Mr. Speaker, will the Prime Minister announce in an hour in his fall economic statement that he's gotten a little bit of common sense, that he's going to cancel the quadrupling and cap the tax until the carbon tax election, when I will win and axe the tax all?
Mr. Speaker, our solution to Canadians who are having trouble affording housing is to build more housing, is to invest in working with municipalities to unlock more homes built, to bring down rents. These are the investments we're making. But Mr. Speaker, it's interesting that the Leader of the Opposition talks about the damage we're doing to Canada by delivering $10 a day childcare, the damage we're doing to Canada by delivering dental care to kids who can't afford it, the damage we're doing to Canada by continuing to step up for seniors by protecting their pensions. If that's damage, then we really see what the Conservative leader is made of.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister is forcing Canadians to give $15 billion to one battery plant that we now learn is going to employ 1,600 foreign workers with Canadian tax dollars. Now, $15 billion works out to $1,000 in federal taxes for every single family in Canada. You would think that he would read the contract he signed with this multinational company. And if he did, can he tell us the section in that contract that limits the number of foreign workers that get Canadian tax dollars?
The The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, it is, even for having watched this Leader of the Opposition in his almost 20-year political career, it is still astonishing to see the way he will choose to use any misinformation to score political points. The fact of the matter is, Mr. Speaker, he opposes the investments in manufacturing in Canada. He opposes the Stellantis deal to create EV batteries. He opposes the Volkswagen deal that's going to create up to 30,000 direct and indirect jobs in St. Thomas. He continues to stand against a plan to grow great jobs into a net zero future, and he'll use any fake excuse to try and advance that cause.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
The Prime Minister has spread nothing but disinformation on these very projects. He was billions of dollars in underestimating the original cost before the shovels were even in the ground. He claimed the thing would pay itself back in 5 years. Now we know it's 20. And now we've learned that the majority of the jobs are going to go to foreign workers. That's right, struggling single moms and seniors will pay $1,000 in taxes, mostly to pay the wages of foreign workers who will not even keep the money here. Why does he so thoroughly disdain and disrespect Canadian workers that he wants to send their money to another country?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, that is flat out false, and it is a kind of fear-mongering from the Leader of the Opposition Canadians are seeing almost every single day. Mr. Speaker, these are thousands of good jobs for Canadians because this government has stepped up to reinvest in manufacturing. After decades, after years of neglect under a Conservative government, we are stepping up to deliver for Canadians. We are delivering a strong future into a net zero world, and this Leader of the Opposition is wanting to take us back to the Stone Age.
The two things that strike me as most concerning in those questions would be the $700 a month that on average Canadians are spending on their mortgages. I don't know what's going to happen after my next interest rate. It's terrifying. And also the $15 billion loan, that's $1,000 per Canadian on South Korean workers. I don't like the sound of that. But up next, we've got a murderer's row of questions. We've got Jaws, Raj, Albez, everybody's in, and we've got some different Liberals that try answering the questions. I don't think they're really trying.
L'honorable député de Burnaby-Sud.
When the Prime Minister announced the Stellantis battery plant in Windsor, he said this would be good jobs for a generation of Canadians. Now we're learning that there's potentially a secret deal for 1,600 foreign workers. So when the Prime Minister made this announcement, was it just a photo announcement or was it really a plan to create jobs for Canadians? And will the Prime Minister make this deal public so Canadians can find out whether he broke yet another promise?
Hear, hear. Hear, hear. The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I know nobody in this House was surprised that the Leader of the official opposition fell prey to disinformation and choosing to attack the Stellantis deal. But it's disappointing to see the NDP leader anchored in the community of Windsor speaking out against this Stellantis deal based on nothing but rumors and disinformation. The reality, Mr. Speaker, is thousands upon thousands of good jobs for Canadians, good jobs that will grow the local economy, will contribute to our battery and manufacturing supply chain in Canada. This is a good deal for Canada. Everyone should get behind it, especially people who care about Windsor.
Here's a quick question for you. Maybe you've noticed, maybe it's just me. Does it look like Jagmeet is wearing a bulletproof vest under his coat? He looks pretty big these days, right? Is it just me? I don't know. More questions.
From Calgary Forest Lawn.
Last year, the finance minister promised to balance the budget in her false hopes update, then did a massive flip-flop and promised to balance the budget in the year never. The Prime Minister did a massive flip-flop recently too on his carbon tax scam, where he gave a temporary carve-out for Canadians in Atlantic Canada. That's 3% of Canadians, whereas poll numbers were tanking. After 8 years, this Liberal NDP government are not worth the cost, and they still plan on quadrupling it. Why don't they pause quadrupling the carbon tax in today's failing economic update and call a carbon tax election so Canadians can decide?
The Honourable Minister for Natural Resources and Energy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My honourable colleague often neglects to mention a whole range of important facts. The price on pollution is an important component of a broad approach to fighting climate change. It is done in a manner that addresses affordability concerns. 8 out of 10 Canadian families get more money back than they pay. With respect to home heating oil, it is a specific case. We are focused on ensuring we're doing it in a manner that will help us to drive the fight against climate change while ensuring affordability for Canadians. It is a responsible and thoughtful approach to public policy, something that we never hear from the Conservatives.
The Honourable Member from Calgary Forest Lawn.
Canada's best climate change plan is going to be a change in government under the common sense Conservative leader as Prime Minister. 2 million Canadians going to a food bank in a single month. 1 in 5 are skipping meals. Food inflation out of control. Failed woke policies like the carbon tax are driving up the cost of gas, groceries, and home heating. While these Liberal NDP government continue to miss every single climate change target that they set for themselves, and Canadians get less in these phony rebates. And they still plan on quadrupling it. So why don't they put the pause on quadrupling the carbon tax and go to election so Canadians can decide on the carbon tax themselves?
The Honourable Government House Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I think on this side, and actually for Canadians across this country, but particularly in Ontario, when we hear the words common sense and Conservatives, we get the shivers, because we remember the time when they cut services to education, when they cut services to healthcare, when they cut important services for water that led to deaths in Walkerton, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, when we hear common sense Conservatives, we know that means cuts for Canadians, harms to Canadians, and nothing good comes of it. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Yaroslav Holland's questions are really, really good. He sets off both Jonathan Wilkinson and Karina Gold there in one fell swoop. Up next, Dan Albas. He's a MP from British Columbia, and he goes at Rachel Bendayan, who tries to lecture him into believing her. Let's check that out.
Honourable Member from Central Okanagan, Similkameen, Nicola.
Mr. Speaker, after 8 years of this NDP Liberal government, grocery and home heating bills continue to rise, as do rent and mortgage payments. Scotiabank has said that inflationary government deficits are to blame. If our deficit maker-in-chief was to show fiscal responsibility, it would drop interest rates by 2% and save the average family $700 a month off their mortgage. Does the Prime Minister understand that his deficits are making it difficult for people to afford basic necessities like food and housing? Or does he think that all Canadians are auditioning for Les Mis?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I would like to remind the member opposite and perhaps inform the House that this morning Statistics Canada indicated that inflation has dropped yet again in this country. It is now at 3.1%. Mr. Speaker, Canada continues to have the lowest deficit among all G7 countries, and with respect to the report that my honourable colleague cites, that report indicates that it is actually provincial spending, not federal, and COVID supports that are the result of the statistics that he's citing, Mr. Speaker. The facts are important.
The Honourable Member from Central Okanagan, Similkameen, Nicola.
Mr. Speaker, if we all quiet down, you can already hear the fiscal engines in the background starting to rev up, as the only solution for inflationary spending for this Prime Minister is more inflationary spending. The Conservative leader has challenged the Prime Minister to stop his carbon tax hikes, reduce his deficits, and build homes, not bureaucracy. Will they address these issues in their mini-budget today, or will they reject this common sense plan and show that the only thing that isn't subject to rising inflation in Canada is the competence of this NDP Liberal government?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Mr. Speaker, as the Prime Minister stated just a few moments ago, the Deputy Prime Minister and the Minister of Finance will be tabling the fall economic statement at 4 p.m. in this House. All members, including the member opposite, will have a chance to look at all of the numbers, and we will have a chance in this House to debate the economic plan that our government has put forward, Mr. Speaker. I would remind the member opposite, when he talks of deficit, that Canada continues to have the lowest deficit among all G7 countries, and we will continue to be fiscally responsible.
What do you guys think? Does Rachel Bendayan have a very condescending way about her? She is a secretary for Chrystia Freeland, right? So maybe she's learning from her mentor to use that terrible condescending tone. It's hard to listen to. Up next, Rachel Thomas. She's an MP from Alberta, and she was going at Sean Fraser yesterday, but she's bringing more heat today. Won't let him off the hook. He looks like he's having fun answering the questions, dancing like a clown, always.
Honourable member from Lethbridge.
The Prime Minister promised to make housing more affordable for Canadians, but we know that wasn't totally true. After 8 years of this Liberal government, rent has doubled, housing prices have skyrocketed, in fact, they've doubled as well, and mortgage payments, of course, have gone through the roof. In fact, today, Scotiabank confirmed that mortgage rates have increased by 2% just due to this government's overspending. No other factors considered, just this government's overspending. Mortgage rates have gone up by 2%, which means on average $700 a month extra on a family's mortgage. When will this government do the responsible thing, rein in their spending, so that Canadians can afford to put a roof over their head?
The Honourable Minister for Housing, Infrastructure and Communities.
Mr. Speaker, in order to address the national housing crisis, we're making the investments necessary to get Canada building again. And I have good news for my colleague. It is working. When we look at the Statistics Canada report from yesterday, we see significant increases in the investments in residential construction. In fact, the heading of the section from the report is entitled Strong Gains in Residential Investment, indicating a nearly 8% increase just this past month. We have a plan to continue to cut costs for home builders and to make the investments necessary to get the homes built that the economy and that families who live in it need.
The Honourable Member from Lethbridge.
I'm not sure what Liberal report the honourable member is reading from, but the stat is this. Actually, fewer homes are being built, and investment in the market is down by 14% for new construction. So that's the fact. And out of that, then, rent is doubling for Canadians, mortgages are skyrocketing, and housing prices have also doubled. Canadians can't afford to house themselves. In fact, their mortgage rates are up on average by $700 a month, and that is only due to this government's overspending. Just due to their overspending alone, $700 a month. No other factors considered, just their overspending. When will they rein it in, do the responsible thing, and allow Canadians to afford a roof over their head?
The Honourable Minister for Housing, Infrastructure.
Mr. Speaker, with respect to my honourable colleague, she just does not have her numbers right. She is entitled to her own opinion, but certainly not to her own facts. I will tell you specifically what the Stats Canada, which is not some Liberal organization, it operates independently. They indicated this month investment in residential building went up 7.3%. Single-family home investment increased 6.4%. Multi-unit construction rose 8.2%. Mr. Speaker, if the Conservatives are concerned about the housing crisis, why are they committing to cut funding for home building and to raise taxes on home builders?
We're not done with the dancing clown Sean Fraser yet. There's more questions coming up. It's interesting. Here's a guy to watch, Matt Genero. He's an Alberta MP, and he goes pretty hard at Fraser, but then Fraser needs Karina Gould to come in and back him up.
Member from Edmonton Riverbend.
Mr. Speaker, after 8 years of this Prime Minister, rent has doubled. House prices have doubled, and mortgage payments are up 150%. Just now, Statistics Canada shows that investment in housing construction is down 14%. Turns out that photo ops with the housing minister in hard hats don't actually build homes. Who knew? Will the government end their photo ops so Canadians can get houses built?
The Honourable Minister for Housing.
Mr. Speaker, I find it fascinating when there are accusations about using photo ops for political gain when the leader of the Conservative Party, when he was a minister, actually violated election rules for a photo op where he showed up wearing a Conservative Party logo on behalf of the government of Canada. Mr. Speaker, with respect to my honourable colleague, he has the facts wrong. Stats Canada is indicated that we are actually seeing an increase in housing investments when it comes to the residential sector. Housing starts are up. In fact, we are on pace to build more than 50,000 additional homes over and above the record that the Conservatives achieved while they were in government.
Absolutely. The honourable member from Edmonton Riverbend.
Mr. Speaker, you know what, Mr. Speaker? When the Conservative leader was Minister of Housing, a typical family home cost only $450,000. Investment in housing construction is down 14% under this minister. Rent has doubled, house prices have doubled, and mortgage payments are up 150%. Again, will the government end their photo op so Canadians can get houses built?
The Honourable Government House Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We know that the Conservatives like to make up facts, but I didn't realize that they were trying to make a new way of doing math. When Statistics Canada says that housing starts are up 7%, that does not equal a decrease of 14%. I would encourage the members opposite to look at the Stats Canada report, but we understand that they don't have a lot of respect for Stats Can because it was them when they were in government that cut the long-form census because they don't like to make policy based on data because then they can actually realize that they're making bad policy. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
You never know what you're going to get with Karina Gould. Sometimes she's just half asleep. The other times she goes off. It's interesting. Up next, a couple of NPs from the NDP. One of them, the second guy, check him out. Super interesting. Charlie Angus, a personal favorite. Don't know why. Somehow I can relate to this guy. They go at Anita Anand and Richie Valdez. Two MPs that I generally don't like it when they're speaking in the House. You'll find out why.
The honourable member from Edmonton Griesbach.
Mr. Speaker, Canada's public service workers stepped up during the pandemic and every day since to deliver the critical services Canadians rely on. How does this government thank them? With a disastrous rollout to a new healthcare plan. Workers are paying thousands of dollars out of pocket for their medication, healthcare, and wait months to be reimbursed, forcing families to make impossible decisions. The Liberals' lack of urgency to act just shows how out of touch they are. When will the government stop delaying and fix this mess so workers can have the benefits they earned?
The Honourable President of the Treasury Board.
Mr. Speaker, Canada's public servants and their families deserve to have access to their benefits as quickly as possible. I have been in close touch with the supplier and have ensured that the supplier will agree to bringing down call wait times to between 5 to 10 minutes by December 31st, opening call centres on weekends, as well as introducing escalation processes for those who aren't served well. Mr. Speaker, we will always make sure that Canada's public servants are reimbursed for their benefits. We are grateful for their service every single day. Thank you.
The honourable member from Timmins, James Bay.
So we're getting the fall economic update from the government today. Well, let me give an update from small businesses in Northern Ontario. I mean, first they got hammered by the pandemic, then they got hammered by high inflation. Now they're being hammered by Liberal indifference. And if the Prime Minister doesn't change course on the CBA repayments, many of our businesses are going to be forced to close their doors in January. So will the Prime Minister do the right thing and extend the loan repayment deadline so that we can have our small businesses get back on their feet?
Excellent.
The Honourable Minister for Small Business.
Mr. Speaker, we know times are tough and still tough for small businesses. If they are unable to repay by January 18, they still have a full 3 years to repay their CIBA loan. We extended the term loan repayment deadline to make sure that small businesses are able to focus on navigating pandemic recovery. We are also cutting taxes for growing small businesses and lowering credit card fees by up to a quarter. We will always be there for small businesses, Mr. Speaker, and that will never change.
Do you understand what I mean about those ladies and their voices? They have such a weird tone, and the condescending. Like, That's the part I can't really stand. I can handle anybody's voice. Up next, though, we've got Michael Cooper, an MP from Alberta. Little bit of a, you'll see what I mean, but he goes hard a couple of times at Francois Philippe Champagne, who loses it. Uses his same lines, though. He always uses these lines. Check it out.
Honourable member from St. Albert, Edmonton.
Mr. Speaker, after 8 years, this NDP Liberal government isn't worth the cost. The Liberal-appointed chair of the Green Slush Fund resigned in disgrace after it was revealed that she funneled more than $200,000 of taxpayers' money into her company. An independent report reveals that this just scratches the surface of corruption at the foundation. So how many more Liberal insiders have used the Green Slush Fund to line their pockets?
The Honourable Minister for Innovation.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And I'm sure that Canadians who are watching this member are wondering what he's saying again, Mr. Speaker. Let me bring facts to the story. Mr. Speaker, from the moment we heard of allegation, we commissioned to have an independent investigation. We froze the fund of the institution, Mr. Speaker. We accepted the resignation of the chair. The CEO has resigned, Mr. Speaker. We're going to go to the bottom of this, Mr. Speaker, and we're going to continue to help the companies in our country, Mr. Speaker.
The independent report revealed that multiple board members voted to funnel money from the fund to companies that they had an interest in. This is scandalous. In the face of evidence of self-dealing and corruption, the minister has not seen fit to fire anyone. Why? Which Liberal insiders is he protecting? Why?
The Honourable Minister for Innovation.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And you know what is scandalous, Mr. Speaker? Is these conservatives making claims, Mr. Speaker, making allegations against people, Mr. Speaker. What a responsible government does, Mr. Speaker, is when there's allegation, we investigate. That's exactly what we did, Mr. Speaker. We suspended the financing of the organization. The CEO has resigned. We have accepted the resignation of the chair, Mr. Speaker. We're going to go to the bottom of this, but we're going to continue to help companies in this country. We invest in green technologies, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, the simple fact is that this government's plan just isn't working. They continue to miss climate target after climate target. They're only driving up the cost of living for Canadians. And in Northern Ontario, we cannot afford to pay more for gas and home heating, but the Liberal and NDP politicians across Northern Ontario continue to leave their residents out in the cold. So I will ask again, will we see in today's mini budget a plan from this government to finally cancel their carbon tax hikes?
Speaker, I would like to correct the record. The Harper government didn't meet any of the environmental targets that they have. We are on track, 85% to meet our 2030 targets. We have 6 years left, Mr. Speaker, to get there, and we will meet the interim 2026 targets. We are meeting our targets when it comes to climate change, when it comes to protecting nature, when it comes to phasing out plastic pollution. They don't believe in any of this, Mr. Speaker. They want to increase pollution in Canada, not on this side of the House. We're working for Canadians, for the health of Canadians, for the future of our kids and grandkids, Mr. Speaker.
We've got Garnet Genius is up next. He's an Alberta MP, pretty interesting guy, well-spoken too. He's going to take a couple of swings at LeBlanc here. And then after that, Rick Perkins is going to take a couple more swings at Francois Philippe Champagne. Wonder if he's going to mention about, don't trust these conservatives.
NDP Liberal government spent $54 million on the Arrive scam app, and now RCMP are investigating contractors. More evidence that after 8 years, this Prime Minister is not worth the cost. Now, two senior public servants have accused each other of lying about who made the decision to hire GC Strategies. GC Strategies is a two-man company that does nothing and that subcontracts all the actual work. So will the minister responsible for this decision stand up now and explain to the House why GC Strategies was chosen?
The Honourable Minister.
Mr. Speaker, what I'm happy to explain to the House is how seriously our government takes allegations of inappropriate behavior with taxpayers' money and contracting or subcontracting. We're obviously very pleased that the committee is looking into this matter. We're pleased that the Auditor General is also seized with this question. And we're also pleased, Mr. Speaker, that the Canadian Border Services Agency, when these issues came to light, took the appropriate action in internal reviews and, as was appropriate, referred any and all of these circumstances to the appropriate authorities.
The honourable member from South Shore, St. Margaret's.
South Korea's ambassador told Windsor officials that the auto giant Stellantis will employ 1,600 workers from South Korea, not Canada, at the $15 billion subsidized battery plant. Every mom on a minimum wage, every couple struggling to pay their mortgage, every union assembly line worker will each pay $1,000 in taxes to subsidize these foreign workers. After 8 years, this Prime Minister's not worth the cost. Will the Prime Minister ensure that all jobs at the Stellantis plant go to Canadian paychecks, not foreign workers?
The Honourable Minister for Innovation.
Mr. Speaker, we will take no lessons from these Conservatives, Mr. Speaker. They have done nothing for the people of Windsor. They have done nothing for the workers, Mr. Speaker. And they have certainly done nothing for auto sector, Mr. Speaker. One thing that we have done, Mr. Speaker, is to maximize opportunities for Canadians, Mr. Speaker. And let me give him some news. The CEO of the company just confirmed that there will be 2,500 Canadian workers at the plant and up to 2,300 to build the plant, Mr. Speaker. This is what I call working for Canadians.
We will take no lessons from these Conservatives, Mr. Speaker. FPC always says something like that. He brings an interesting energy, lots of fire in his responses. But up next, he better save a little fuel for the tank, because Kyle Seaback, who's usually asking about scandals, is more interested in the battery plant in Windsor now and having Canadians employed out of there. He goes pretty hard making his points.
This minister should take a lesson from just about anyone willing to give it, and I'll tell you why. The unemployment rate in Windsor is 7%. They're bringing in 1,600 workers from Korea. And this plant is going to cost $1,000 per Canadian family. Every unemployed union worker in Windsor could have this job. Instead, these incompetent, arrogant liberals give the job to 1,600 Koreans. Will the minister promise right now the jobs will go to hardworking Canadians, not workers from any other country, including Korea?
I'm sure Canadians are shocked to hear this member again repeating falsehood, Mr. Speaker. Canadians know, Mr. Speaker, not to trust these Conservatives when it comes to jobs, when it comes to growth, when it comes to the auto sector, Mr. Speaker. Let me repeat so he can write down the number. 2,500 jobs at the plant, Mr. Speaker. Up to 2,300 to build the plant, Mr. Speaker. That's what the CEO said. That's what we're going to do, Mr. Speaker. We're going to build opportunity for Canadians.
I might be the only one that gets a kick out of FPC, but I find the energy. It would be interesting, I think, to see him in an opposition role. Up last, it's going to be an NDP MP from British Columbia, Lisa Marie Barron, and she's asking about the Gaza situation. I don't really know if Canada has any influence on that situation, but our Minister of Foreign Affairs, Melanie Joly, steps in to kind of lull us to sleep to wrap up question period. We'll follow up with a segment right after this. Here, last question.
The honourable member from Nanaimo, Ladysmith.
Mr. Speaker, Canada's leading humanitarian aid agencies have united together to call for a ceasefire in Gaza. People in Nanaimo, Ladysmith are demanding action from the federal government. All hostages need to be released and a ceasefire declared so that no more children are killed. But this Prime Minister doesn't seem to recognize that the killing of over 13,000 innocent civilians and more than 1.7 million displaced is an atrocity, and it must end now. So I will ask you again, when will the Prime Minister call for a ceasefire?
Hear, hear. Hear, hear. l'honorable ministre des Affaires mondiales.
The Honourable Minister for Global Affairs.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Of course, we've seen horrific scenes on October 7 when Hamas attacked innocent Israelis. And of course, we also know that Gaza is one of the worst places on earth to live in right now. So we need to make sure that all civilians are protected. We need to make sure as well as humanitarian aid can be sent to Gaza. We are seeing that right now there are negotiations happening between Israel, between Hamas, brokered by Qatar, and we look forward to seeing all hostages released and humanitarian aid allowed to Gaza.
Yes, so that wraps up the highlights of Question Period for November 24th. It was an interesting show. It's always more fun when Trudeau shows up. It gives us something to make fun of, a little more material. And I think that Poilievre gets up for Trudeau more than he does the others. Who knows? What we're doing here is we're bringing you the highlights of Question Period without translating, without the interference by the House Speaker. Greg Fergus is a disaster and slows the process down by 10 or 15 minutes an episode, each Question Period. He makes it go by much slower. So we're cutting that out, giving you a concentrated dose of information and entertainment. That's what we're doing. We're going to send you off on the best clip from today's Question Period, which I thought was Poilievre flipping out on one of his earlier questions. He really does go hard in the paint. You can tell he was cross. That's it, guys. Enjoy this. We'll be back. My name's Aaron. Like and subscribe. We're doing Canadian politics right here, trying to bring you the information and make it a little bit entertaining. That is it. We'll catch you next time. Thanks for watching.
Proposing is for the government, the federal government, to do less damage and cost less money so that Canadians don't have to live in austerity and cuts like they are today. Today we found out that rent rose faster in October than in any month in 40 years. The Prime Minister's solution to that? Quadruple the carbon tax. Quadruple the carbon tax? Mr. Speaker, will the Prime Minister announce in an hour in his fall economic statement that he's gotten a little bit of common sense, that he's going to cancel the quadrupling and cap the tax until the carbon tax election, when I will win and axe the tax off?